Hello and welcome to this series of lectures on advanced performance management. My name is Stuart Murphy and I'm going to be your tutor for the sessions. These are brought to you by Viva Financial Tuition. Let's get into it. So, what's the plan? We're going to run through an introduction to advanced performance management. We're going to be talking about this idea of planning and control. We'll look at some of the strategic models that can help us with our performance management. We'll talk about this idea of benchmarking, so a good way of knowing whether we are doing well or doing badly is benchmarking. Then we'll talk about risk and uncertainty. So good news is no longer tested with numbers, but still need to know about this concept and consider it when we're developing our performance management systems. So what is performance management? So it says there, it's a system of monitoring and evaluating work with the aim of improving performance and meeting the overall objectives of the organization. So I find a simple way of thinking about performance management is it's three things. So it says they're monitoring, so measuring, and evaluating. So we're going to compare and see whether we're doing well or doing badly. So monitoring, evaluating, and then improving the performance, taking some kind of action. So those would be the three key parts for performance management. So measure, what are you going to look at? Compare, what's the standard that you're aiming for? And then action. Okay, so if you're not hitting your standard, what can you do about it? So an easy / silly way of remembering this for me is if I was in a hotel and I was jumping in the shower for the first time, then I want to performance manage the temperature in the shower. So before I get in the shower, I'm going to put my hand in and I'm going to measure the temperature of the water. And I'm going to compare it to what I want, and maybe it's too hot or it's too cold. And if that's the case, I have to take an action. So I'm going to turn the tap, right? So I might turn the tap to the left to make it a bit colder, because that's what happens at home when I turn the tap to the left. Oh no, it didn't work. It just got hotter. Okay, so I'm going to turn the tap to the right more than I turned it to the left to get it to be hotter. And yeah, great. Now they've got the temperature I want. And so I have performance managed the temperature in the shower. I measured it, I compared it, and I took some kind of action to get it to where I wanted it to be. So if I wanted to give it a slightly fuller definition of performance management, so you could say it includes defining the overall objective, so deciding what we want, setting a target for how we're going to get there, defining some strategies, some plans of how we're going to meet those targets, coming up with a particular target for each strategy, and then measuring, comparing, taking action, and then reviewing our objectives and strategies for the targets. Okay, so yes, performance management does include all of those things. I would say the three key things to remember are the measuring, so the bottom left there, comparing, and taking action. In the exam, you often get questions that say things like, how does this affect performance management? And you wouldn't necessarily have to talk about all 8 of these things. If you talk about the measures, so how does this change what we're measuring? How does this change the standard we're comparing ourselves to? How does this change the actions that we would take if we're not doing as well as we'd like to do? Those would be the 3 that I would focus on. So as part of, during the course, we're going to be acting as strategic management accounting. So we're high up the organization. We're usually working with quite large organizations, maybe multinationals with operations in different countries. So we're often going to be working with the board of directors. So what is strategic management accounting? It supports performance management process through the provision of relevant, reliable, and timely information. Okay, so with any of these definitions, you always think, well, okay, do I need to learn that? Is that what I need to know? Now in this exam, at this level, professional level, about 20% of the marks are for theory. So with a definition like this, it probably is worth learning it. And then this would be what I would say is the low-hanging fruit marks in the exam, the easy marks to score. So if you have a 10-mark question and it's something like, explain to the finance director how strategic management accounting could help improve decision-making at XYZ company. So there'll be a couple of marks. It's 10 marks, 20% for theory, so that means 2 marks for theory, and one or two of them would be for defining, well, what exactly is strategic management accounting, basically. So I would say it's probably worthwhile being able to define it or explain it. And the fact that we're acting like one of these for the course means if you can understand what the aim of strategic management accounting is, it makes everything else is going to make more sense, because you go, okay, I can see why we're learning that, because it supports this strategic management accounting. So characteristics of strategic management accounting. So we're thinking strategically, right? So we're not just thinking about how do we hit our budget this year. We're thinking how do we support the long-term aims of the organization. You're going to be doing a blend of financial and non-financial. So you find that the higher up the organization you go, the more non-financial information would be considered. The lower down we are, the more we just sort of stick to the budgets, which is mainly financial. You're going to be looking inside and outside the organization. You're going to be looking at potential changes, because we're often thinking long-term, which the competitive environment is constantly changing, so we have to change over the long term to keep up with it. Information would think about things like customers, you'd think about the products, you'd think about risk and uncertainty, internal and external, and then you might come up with ways of helping the company succeed in the competitive market. Not necessarily you would make the decision, but you might have some suggestions, sort of thing. So the way I consider this, ultimately management accounting, why is it called management accounting? It's because we work with managers, right? So it's not because we're in charge, it's because we work with the managers, and the way we work with them is we allow them or facilitate their decisions by providing good information to them, useful information. And the kind of information we're going to be providing is dictated by the decisions that those managers are making. So if we're talking strategic management accounting, we can think about, well, who are the managers that we're talking about? Well, the managers are going to be the board of directors in this case. And what kinds of decisions are the board of directors going to be making? So they'll be making long-term decisions that are wide in scope, that consider the strengths and weaknesses of the organization and the opportunities and threats that exist outside of the organization. And so if those are decisions that they're going to be making, we are going to have to provide information that mirrors those requirements, right? So if it's long-term decisions, you're going to be talking about forecasts, 3 to 5 years. What's going to happen over the next 3 to 5 years? If we're talking about wide in scope, well, we can't just focus on the financial side. We have to think about the non-financial side too. If we're thinking about strategy, then we don't exist in a vacuum. So we have to think about the risk and uncertainty that exists in the environment around the strategy. And then we have to think about, how can we leverage our strengths or mitigate our weaknesses? So we have to think about the internal side of things as well. So that's the idea of strategic management accounting. And that's the way I would be thinking about it. How can we get good information to the managers so they can make good decisions?